I'm vlogging right now. How obnoxious of me. All right, so before we go in, you guys see that I have my tea, my cough lozenges, and my tissue because unfortunately I didn't know it was going to be 40 degrees here. And I walked to Steak Shake last night, and I'm from California, and so literally all I own are like shorts and sundresses. And it looked really nice outside, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm just gonna go for a quick little walk to the Steak and Shake. And by the time I got there, my lips were freezing. So thanks for that. This is the first time I've been in North Carolina. I've heard that I gotta go get some cookout apparently. Yes. So I'm definitely doing that. So thank you so much for welcoming me here to Elon. You guys have a beautiful campus. I got to sleep in the African American Resource Center, which is very aesthetically pleasing. So thank you so much for welcoming me here today. It seems like you guys have had a really great conference, and I'm so honored to be your keynote for today. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about my career, my life, and what living in my truth has meant for me personally, because I'm someone who has sort of constantly been trying to have this conversation with myself about what being authentic means. And that's for me still a journey that I'm on. So I'm going to tell you the journey that I've made basically to this point. So I have always loved journaling. I was raised very religious, and in my church that I used to go to, we used to have this system where if you were like a great prayer warrior, or if you answered questions during Sunday school, you would get like these little Monopoly dollars, right? And because I read a lot of Revelations and I was kind of obnoxious, I was always the best prayer warrior in school, and I made a lot of those Monopoly dollars. And so I remember the first thing I bought when I went to the church store, and it was, back in the day, Lisa Frank was really huge. And I just really wanted a Lisa Frank journal so bad. But of course, at the church store, we had like the knockoff Lisa Frank stuff. And I bought this, I remember it still to this day so vividly. It was this purple journal with like these green psychedelic like aliens on it. Very, that pseudo like 60s stuff that was happening in the 90s. And so that was my first journal, and that's when I started having a continuous conversation with myself, right? And I've always loved journaling because you can write something down on Monday, and by Friday, you have a full story, right? And I started journaling and writing a lot about just what was on my mind, right? And through having a lot of those conversations with myself, I started to recognize, that I was, a little different than most kids, that sounds so cliche, I looked in the mirror. I didn't look in the mirror and hate myself, but I noticed that I was different, right? And so basically I journaled all through elementary school up into middle school and into high school. And by then, MySpace was the thing. Y'all remember MySpace? Oh my gosh. And so everyone was like posting on their MySpace about their lives and stuff, and they had like a little journal feature, so I started writing on there. But there were a lot of like conversations I was having with myself, especially when it came to gender, especially when it came to sexuality, that were really uncomfortable for me to sort of have publicly with my friends, right? And so I ended up going to this little website called Zanga. I wonder if anyone in here knows Zanga. Raise your hand if you remember Zanga. It's usually almost no one. Zanga is like for those of you guys who don't remember or know, Zanga is basically like, imagine Tumblr, but like no one's talking to each other. There's no reblogs, but everyone is just about as self-righteous. That's Zanga. And so I had my little Zanga. I think my username at the time was like Neon Star Ranger or Raver or something like that. I was really into I never went to a rave, but I was really into the idea of me going to a rave. And I had like these little anime pictures of like, I don't know, I was a lot. I was a little weeaboo back then, in the most obnoxious way. And I just started kind of continuing this conversation, and that was like the beginning of me having a public diary, which, to me was such a, ironic thing. A diary is usually supposed to be so private, but for me it was so public. And I started gaining a following. I was writing a lot about my life. I was writing a lot about gender. I read one queer theory book and just knew everything. And I was just expressing myself, and I'm an artist, and obviously I've always loved to express myself, my feelings, my thoughts, the positives, the negatives, everything. But I always kept it very raw and real. And so from Zynga, I decided to become a little bit more refined, and I went to Blogger and started my own little Blogger. And on Blogger, everyone was kind of talking about this new website called YouTube, right? And so I kind of was very iffy about, getting a channel. I mean, at this point, I was 15 years old. I was in high school. And, back then, you're dealing with all these sort of conversations with yourself about your body, your image, what you look like, where you fit in, and things like that. And I just didn't really I was comfortable writing, but I wasn't necessarily comfortable being visible, right? But you guys also have to remember that YouTube back in 2005 was cat videos, and it was basically MySpace with a video. Like, think about you publishing like a Facebook video right now on your private page, where only your 20 or so friends end up seeing it. That's what YouTube really was back then. It wasn't like today where you post something, it goes viral, and there's money, there's all this. It was just a place to post videos, right? And so slowly but surely, I kind of warmed up to the idea, and my parents gave me $25 every week to spend on food. But usually I would spend it on Sims expansion packs, because that was also my life back then. So just to give you an image, I lived on Go Gaia Online. My Neopets were dead. Definitely dead by then. And I spent all day, making Sims and downloading customizable content for my Sims library. But I decided that this month I was going to go and spend my money on a little rinky-dink webcam, right? And so I bought this little $25 Logitech webcam. And in many ways, it was sort of an easier format for me to do, because I just had to come home every day after school and turn on my camera and just talk, and I talked about everything. I talked about, that guy I thought was cute at school, that girl I thought was kind of a bitch, this teacher who gave me too much homework, my annoying little brother, all the stuff that you would, a teenager would write about, right? And so I kept doing that, and I really enjoyed it, because I started to sort of recognize that, social media had that ability to sort of allow you to recreate yourself in many ways, right? And so I developed this character, because I thought I was funny back then. I developed this character called Daphne the Destroyer. And Daphne the Destroyer was basically, I found my grandma's church wig one day, and I had a bunch of grease paint left over from Halloween, and so I painted my lips black and wore my grandmother's wig, and I think I actually put the wig backwards too, and it kind of gave me an emo kind of bang situation. And Daphne the Destroyer was just this emo girl with delusions of grandeur who believed that she was going to take over the world, from her bedroom. She liked local music. She was really, really chill or whatever. And she, castrated her boyfriend on Halloween. That was one of the videos I did, where I told this elaborate story about how my boyfriend cheated on me, and then lifted up a bag of a hot dog. And I was like, this is the penis. I don't know. It was real cringe. It was real cringe. As you can tell, I've always been a feminist. This kid in castrate is not funny. I'm sorry. So anyway, I really enjoyed sort of having that character, because it really was the first sort of character that I started to sort of play with gender expression. Now, this time I had identified myself as genderqueer. And so I was very much, sort of okay with that, but having, sort of that expression, publicly was sort of iffy to me. And so I was able to sort of, in many ways, build confidence through being able to have a YouTube channel where I was just well, I'm just going to do whatever I want on here because no one's watching it. It was my thought process at the time. And so anyway, also around this time in my life, when I was 15, 16 years old, I was working extremely hard, putting together a portfolio to apply to the college of my dreams. When I was in the 5th grade, my mother took me to this animation conference for kids of color. And I heard about this amazing school called Cal Arts, right? And as I said, mentioned to you earlier, I was a little weeaboo growing up, and so I not without a ounce of irony believed that I was going to like become this amazing manga artist. I was going to work in anime. I was going to fly away to Japan. I was going to just, that was my life. I genuinely believed that. And I thought, well, the only way for me to do that is to go to Cal Arts, right? Because back then, a lot of people that were going there were doing a lot of that stuff. So I sort of had this tunnel vision approach where I was like, this was the only college I learned about that I knew that I wanted to go to. Cal Arts, for those of you guys who don't know, was started by Disney. A lot of your favorite Cartoon Network shows, the creators of those shows went to Cal Arts. Powerpuff Girls, SpongeBob, a lot of really, really successful shows came out of Cal Arts, right? And so I was just like, this is a school I'm going to get into. So from the 5th grade to about, the age of 15, 16, I was working extremely hard on getting together a portfolio. And so my YouTube channel at the time kind of became very much about, my process of me applying to Cal Arts, right? And so it was interesting because my last couple of years of school, I definitely noticed that I was like sort of popular or whatever. And I went to, my school was very strange. Like a lot of schools, you kind of have this structure of like, the jocks and the nerds or whatever. But I went to like the kind of school where people would lie about their address so they can get in, because it was just such a prestigious school where you post like, people would post there was rankings on tests and everyone knew who had the top score. It was very that. So like, it was feasible to believe that I was popular because I was just like cool or whatever. And like people went to see me perform in theater shows. Like, I was just like, yeah, that makes sense. Everyone just knew my name and I was like, yeah, And I didn't find out until like the last year, like literally the day after graduation, that literally everyone watched my YouTube channel. And I'm dying because I've made so many videos talking shit, and I was like, so that's why she doesn't like me. She saw the video where I was calling her a bitch. Okay, well, damn, that makes sense. But I was okay because, of course, after all of my hard work, I ended up going away I got into Cal Arts. The year I applied, there was like a 9% acceptance rate. It was very uncommon for people to get in out of high school. And so, of course, I was just feeling my life. I was like, well, I mean, that sucks or whatever, but like, I'm going away to college. So who cares, right? And so I went away to college, and college was a strange experience for me. The year before I went, I actually did a summer school program with a bunch of animation kids. And a lot of those kids ended up getting into Cal Arts with me. But going away this time, I kind of had this sort of, it was the first time I went away from home an extended period of time. I had like this realization that I really had no responsibility to be the person who I said I was the day before. So I had like, cause I like usually with high school, I kind of had this thing where, when it came to especially like my identity and the changes that I had in terms of discussing myself and things like that, I think a lot of what I did was sort of work with them with where they were and also try to build with where I was on top of that. So for me back then, identifying as genderqueer was really me kind of like trying to say, all right, well, I know that you know me as this person and call me that, but there's also like this other side of me, and and then da-da-da-da-da, that's kind of the way that I had rationalized it. But I realized when I went away to college, I really had no responsibility to do that. These are all new people. This is a whole new world. And I recognized pretty strongly that the identity that I felt I had within that space was no longer really, was not actually how I felt. And so I had this like aha moment in college where I was like, oh shit, I'm not this really cool, interesting queer person. I'm just a boring binary trans person. Womp womp, And so that was kind of, on one hand, it was great because I kind of had a clearer vision of who I was. On the other hand, it was kind of terrible because, oh my gosh, I'm in college now. And it's very, very high stakes. I mean, Cal Arts has this thing where every student who's in animation has to do a 3-minute film every year, which on paper sounds really easy, but in animation you have to imagine, like a second of animation is 24 drawings. Like, it's a lot of work. And so it was a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. And I now have this concern of like my transition, right? And so that was definitely a time where I turned back to YouTube to kind of talk about a lot of what I was going through with my transition and stuff. I started ordering hormones online because I didn't want to go to a therapist to discuss, the fact that that I knew who I was or whatever. And so I started to do like little hormone update videos. I've been on estrogen for a day, I can already feel changes, sort of shit. And I experienced a lot of the early stages of like just really living and being happy with your transition. But of course, it was still hard for me to navigate around the world because this was all new for me. So I've always sort of been a very goal-oriented person. And back then, I spent a lot of time researching about trans people's lives, right? And back in this time, and things are changing a lot right now, but back in this time, when you would read about trans women's lives, right? You would basically read these stories about, I figured out that I was trans, I started taking my hormones, I got my surgeries, I killed my entire family and everyone I knew, then I moved to another state and just, lived in this experience where no one knew that I was trans, and I'm sitting here writing this to you on my porch. I've got 1.5 children, I have a white picket fence, my husband's inside cooking dinner, everything's copacetic, and that's my life. That was the story, except for the whole killing your family part. That was the story. Stealth was such the thing that everyone did. And for those of you guys who don't understand why, or what stealth is basically living in a situation where the people around you do not know that you're trans. I'm sorry, my Mose is running. My Mose is running, I did that earlier today. Living in a situation where people around you don't know that you're trans. And I know that there's a lot of people who maybe don't understand why trans people would do that. But when you're a trans person, especially in a world where people are constantly sort of coming at you because you're trans, it becomes very clear to you that if you can afford to, if it's possible for you to just sort of, slip under the radar and not be seen as a trans person, that you would. You would make that decision and pursue that goal because it's just, it's safer, For me, I remember going back home every summer, and I used to go to Hollywood all the time because I thought that Hollywood was like so progressive and so accepting. It's not, but I thought back then that it was. And where I used to live, I used to be able to just get onto a bus and go directly to Hollywood, right? And so what I would do is, if you look at my YouTube username, you'll know that my YouTube username is trans DIY because I used to hand sew all of my clothes, and my original channel was going to be a trans sewing channel. That was the initial plan. Didn't really go that direction, but that was the plan. So I used to hand sew like all my clothes, and I used to do this thing where I would put on like the little t-shirt dress I would make. I would put on my leggings. I'd put on like a baggy jacket and some baggy pants. I would slip out from the front door. I would walk down the street. I would take off, my baggy jeans and my baggy jacket, and I would stuff it under the bus stop, jump on the bus, and go directly to Hollywood, right? And what I would often do, especially during the summer, was I was looking for employment, right? I was looking for a job, right? And so I thought again that I can just go to Hollywood Boulevard and someone's gonna hire me, right? Because they're all so cool there, right? And so I had a lot of experiences where I would walk in, I would fill out my application, everything would be fine and copacetic, whatever. And back then, my name or my gender marker was not changed, and so I didn't put any of that stuff down. And so I'd walk in, I'd write all that stuff down, I'd hand them the application, and there was just this very unique sort of like reaction often of like looking at the application and then like looking up at me and being very confused, and then looking at the application, smiling at me, putting it down, and we'll call you sort of thing, and me walking out the door and hearing people laugh, hearing them laugh at me. And so oftentimes when you're a trans person, your transness is clearly a thing that comes into your life as an obstacle. And if you can make it so that you don't have to deal with that, you would, right? And for me, as my transition went forward, it became very clear to me that I could, right? That if I wanted to do that, I could do that. And I wanted to do that again so that jobs were easier, that being social was easier, that so much stuff was just it was just easier. Because you hate, as a trans person, sometimes you just hate having to go through life with your transness being the thing that is the first thing people talk to you about. Because believe it or not, trans people do exist for more things than just being trans. We're also so much more. And as a trans person, you often find yourself in these conversations where you're having to sort of explain that you're not just a trans person. You're having to sort of validate that you're not just a trans person. I'm also this, I'm also that. And people are sort of surprised that you don't exist in this constant conversation of transness, right? And so again, being in a situation where you just don't have to discuss that was the ideal. And so my goal was really to graduate from college with my name marker changed, my name and my gender marker changed, and never have to have the conversation ever again. I wasn't gonna kill my family, but I thought I would move somewhere else and then not have to talk about it ever again, right? And I started really recognizing that I was passing, that I had started to pass in my junior year of college. It's funny because I don't know how the dorms work here, if you guys even have dorms. I don't know if that even is a thing here. But our dorms on our college campus were co-ed, right? And so you basically, what happened is you'd have two people in this room, usually of the same gender, and then you have two people over there, and then you'd have a shared bathroom, right? And so my junior year of school, my suite mates were just very confused as to how they managed to get like a girl suite mate. It was just kind of like, what's going on there, And it was kind of almost explainable because it was a co-ed dorm. It was like, yeah, it just ended up that way. I don't know what to tell you kind of thing. And, and so it was kind of a very awkward situation for me to be in because, when I was a younger queer identifying kid, the thing I despised the most was this idea of like assimilating and this idea of like fading away into a gender and never talking about it. As a queer person, I was very outspoken, very kind of aggressive. To me, being queer meant queering all spaces, deconstructing gender role. And that was just constantly where I was. But of course, at that time, when I was pursuing stealth, that sort of changed in the way that I felt. So I kind of had this sort of awkward thing where I was like, well, I feel like I should talk about it, but then why should I, And of course, it's college, everyone's sort of, young and, looking or whatever. And my suite mate at the time, we'd hang out a lot, and clearly he like maybe had like a little bit of like a crush on me or whatever. And when it came to like men flirting with me, I always sort of had this thing where, well, first of all, I was really bad at being able to understand when that was happening. But at the same time, I also, I had a thing where I was like, this guy doesn't probably know. I'm not gonna sort of go anywhere with it. I'm gonna smile, whatever. But it became kind of clear to a lot of our people in our same major, because we were both animation majors, that he had a little thing for me or whatever. And so one of the students ended up telling him. And he told him in such a strange way, where he described me as like, basically this gay cross-dresser trying to trick him into being attracted to me, which is like, well, I don't have to try, first of all. Second of all, like, that's not what's going on. That's not what's happening here. And he did it, of course, to sort of get him to be not interested in me, but the joke was on him because, I'll just say, if you're ever in a situation where you can possibly sleep with your suite mate, don't do it. It's not a good idea. It's bad. It was fun for what it was, but don't do it ever. It's not a good idea. And so that was kind of, that was also one of the early kind of conversations where it was like, oh shit, should I tell him, should I not? Because it became really clear to me through no real decision of my own that I was passing. And this wasn't the first time that I had this experience. I remember when I was in my sophomore year, and this was really in my like, still sort of getting myself together phase of my life. I used to go to there's this little shopping center near us. And I used to go and I used to do a lot of live drawing because of course I was in animation. So observing real life was like a big part of developing your skill as an animator, right? And so I would sit there in the, outside of Starbucks drawing people, and there was always like this big trucker guy who always came by, and he was just this very interesting person. I'm a character animator, and so characters are just very fascinating to me. And so I'd always, draw him. I would always draw him whenever he showed up, and eventually he noticed, and that's always the worst when people notice, because it's so awkward. You're like sitting there like, drawing, but like pretending you're not looking, but drawing. It's such an awkward situation. You feel like a creeper. And you kind of are, I guess. And so eventually he kind of like, after a couple different times, saw me, started trying to talk to me, and eventually asked me out on a date. Now, back then, I thought to myself, wow, here's this guy who sees me for myself. He loves me for me. And I probably did say loves me because I was a sophomore, meaning I was like 18, so I really didn't understand stuff at all. I was not very smart. And so I was really excited because I thought, oh, wow, here's this guy who's asking me out. He's really, really, really nice, whatever. And long story short, we went out, we went to dinner, this and that, and we ended up going back to his place. And it wasn't until he tried to finger me that I recognized that he didn't know that I was trans. And that was kind of like a terrifying moment because I was in his house alone with him. No one really knew where I was. I thought in my mind he just knew, and he didn't. And so I had to sort of like make sure that I said I wasn't like that or whatever. And it took me home, and then I texted him, and he was pissed, of course. And of course, navigating around that for me, men was really, really hard because I was just in school, like I wasn't trying to really do much. Of course, I was, dating or whatever, but I didn't, I wasn't there. I wasn't existing in public space for the interests of men, And so oftentimes I had men who were attracted to me or interested in me, and just, they'd be mad that they didn't know or things like that. So anyway, by in my junior year also, I ended up sort of seeing this guy in college, and I ended up seeing this guy who lived in the master's dorms. Now, this guy was definitely the summary of like what my type in art school was. He looked like he was from the 70s. He smelled a little weird. I was raised very straight edge, and so I guess when I went away to college, men who smelled like Jack and like and cigarettes, it was kind of exciting to me, and he definitely had that thing. And he was a musician. He maybe didn't shower every day. Like, that was my type, and he smoked a lot of weed, of course. And we just hung out, and, he was one of these guys who I ended up telling that I was trans, and he was like, okay, well, I'll think about it. We ended up hanging out and kind of dating for my whole junior year, and I really enjoyed being in the master's dorms because the master's dorms were basically, you'd have these people who were there for 2 years, you got your own room, you shared a bathroom, you shared a kitchen. It was like not like the bachelor's dorms where you're like implicated by just being in a room with people who don't match your gender, right? And so it became my goal to get into the senior dorms and have my name and everything changed and just be stealth at college because the master's dorms were so separated from everything else, and the students who went there were so new. They were there for 2 years or so. It was very possible for me to do that. And so I managed to get my name changed. I applied to the master's dorms and I got in. And I was so above the moon. I was so happy. I finally would sort of have this year where I wasn't having all the conversations I was having the previous 3 years. Because, being a trans person on campus, it was honestly really stressful because every class I took, I had to email the professor and tell them, hey, here's what my name is. Please don't call me that name. I'm not going to answer. Because that's what I would do is like when people would call my dead name, I just wouldn't answer. And I would like talk to the professor after school. And it was such a stressful thing to go through, just having to have that conversation all the time. It took away a lot from me working, right? And so then I got into my last year. My name was changed. I didn't have to send emails to anyone. I was living in the master's dorms. Everything was copacetic. It was so copacetic for that point. And so, it's the beginning of my senior year. I'm all happy that it's all working out for me. And it was the first couple of weeks of school, which I don't know how y'all get down at Elon or whatever. But, first couple of weeks of school, everyone's kind of like, looking at each other, seeing who's going to be with who or whatever. And, at this point of my life, I would say I was low-key hella cute or whatever, Like I had sort of at this point, learned how to put eyeliner on and like, I was thinner or whatever. I only wore push-up bras. I was in that sort of phase of life where I was really playing up my femininity, my appearance, and this and that. So like, I got a lot of like male attention, or whatever. But still I had that thing of like, especially because this year I was trying to be stealth, where it's like, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna put on this pencil skirt and wear this tank top, just get the free alcohol and then leave. Like it's not, that's my plan. We're not gonna do more than that. We're just doing that. So I wasn't trying to pursue any men, right? I just let them give me free alcohol. I mean, look, it was college. I had an OkCupid account because I was hungry. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, okay? And while I can look back now and say that I wasn't proud of it, I was definitely fed, okay? And I made sure I got extra chicken nuggets so that I could make lunch the next day. It just is what it is. Sometimes you just have to live like that, okay? Don't judge me. Y'all have been there, okay? And so anyway, I had been introduced to this musician, and I guess back then there was always like, I guess this an unintentionally flirty thing I would do where I would mention that I was a film student and like musicians were the composer majors and like we can work together, like we could make music together kind of thing. And there's this so I kind of ended up getting into a lot of conversations with music students or whatever. And there was this drummer who, he was cute or whatever, but I kind of, I friend zoned him pretty quickly. Even though the friend zone doesn't exist, I was like, he's a nice person that I want to know. And I didn't think about him I didn't think I thought he was just a very nice person, and I've had to learn through time that like, sometimes, men, I still would like to think that men can be nice, just nice to women, and there'd be no agenda there. But I had to learn in this particular situation that he wasn't just being nice. And so we saw each other, and one of his roommates was this gay guy. And my introduction to this gay guy was he walked in with a mesh bag full of Natty Ice, which I don't know if y'all drink, but that was my drink back in college. It's like the cheapest, shittiest beer ever. And I knew we were gonna be best friends because he had the alcohol and I didn't have to wear pencil skirts anymore. Me and his gay roommate became best friends, right? And I'd always see the drummer guy and he always would tell me I looked cute or whatever. And I would nod and say, of course, and then we would just move on. But after a couple of months, I kind of felt like, I should tell the gay bestie my situation. Because back then, I thought that like gay men had this like second sense where they just knew, And so I thought that we were for a really long time sort of having that like sort of like nod sort of thing going on. We're like, yeah, I'm trans, And so I pulled him aside and just wanted to have like a formal conversation with him. And he absolutely didn't know and was pretty shocked. And I don't know why people think this, but he thought I was like lying about it. Like, I don't know what kind of joke saying you're trans would be. Like, I don't think I'm trans. Isn't that funny? I don't know if that's really I don't know. I don't understand it. But he thought that I was joking or kidding or whatever. And I was like, no, this is the situation. I explained to him my focus on being stealth. And he was like, all right, you're good. I won't tell anyone, whatever. Right? So apparently, however, the drummer guy was really into me more than I was able to sort of recognize. And that was his roommate. And so apparently what had happened was he had just sort of had, this gay guy ended up getting caught between worlds where he just felt like he had to tell him at a certain point because I guess the drummer guy wouldn't stop talking about me. And so this guy, the drummer guy, was from New Mexico. And not to stereotype anyone from New Mexico, like don't attack me, don't at me on Twitter. But in my experience, a lot of people from New Mexico are this very strange combination of really worldly and super like into Eastern healing and medicine, but like also very conservative. And so he seemed so open-minded, but like was not at all happy with finding out that I was trans. Now, keep in mind, this was not a guy that I was interested in. This was a guy, again, I had like sort of been like, you're a great friend and you compliment me a lot. I want you around, And so I didn't think at all that he had an interest in me, but apparently he did. And his reaction to knowing that I was trans was to then tell essentially everyone I had become friends with in the first couple of months. And of course, that was really devastating to me because I had built up this idea of stealth so massively that it all kind of came crumbling down, you know? And I was initially really upset about it because, you know, and I understood objectively that in a lot of other situations, that could have turned quite dangerous, you know? Even though I had no interest in pursuing this guy, the fact that, you know, he had an interest and was really upset, he could have come and hurt me. And when the news would report on it, people would justify it as I should have been upfront. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here thinking, why the fuck should I tell some guy that I'm trans who I'm not even fucking interested in? Like, that's how I would personally look at it. But I know that regardless of how things would have gone down, I would have always been the person who misled, the person who this and that. And so, you know, I knew that that was an issue. And so I was really, really, really mad at, you know, my gay bestie at the time. But, you know, again, it was college, and he bought me a pair of shoes, and it all was forgiven because I really needed some shoes back then. But, you know, that was like the first kind of real moment of me, like, of course I had that situation, you know, earlier on, but that was the first kind of real moment of like me really being stealth and then being outed. And of course, when I was trying to be stealth, I had a lot of, it was almost like you were in another closet because I couldn't talk about any of this stuff. And this was like during the height of me, you know, being well into self-medication in terms of hormones. And there was a lot of stuff going on that I would have really liked to have had someone to talk to about, but I didn't because I was trying so hard to be stealth, right? And so, of course, I talked a lot about it on my little YouTube channel, which, again, back then, YouTube wasn't what, you know, it is today. You know, I was able to have this little YouTube channel where 100 people watched my little videos, and it wasn't that big of a deal, right? And so anyway, after 4 years of animation education, I had my final review, and they sat me down and told me that I would be more suited for children's illustration. And of course, I'm sitting there like, wait, okay, so I owe Sally Mae how much? I did all this for you to tell me that I shouldn't work in this. Okay, all right. I was really mad because it was like, all right, like I knew to some degree what they were saying was true, but at the same time, I was really determined to work in animation. I thought that was what I had worked from my 5th grade forward, you know? And to have these people who work in the industry, knew my stuff, you know, knew what they were talking about, say, oh, this probably isn't for you after 4 years. And I mean, our tuition there was $54,000 a year. Like, I don't know what y'all's tuition is here, but it's $54,000, you know. So, I was just like, all right, well, okay. But I'm hard-headed like I usually am. And out of college, I decided that I was still going to pursue animation, right? So I ended up getting a job eventually working at Fox ADHD, which is like a Fox animation. It was like an hour-long slot on television that just had weird... So I worked on this show called Axe Cop, right? I don't know. Does anyone in here even know what Axe Cop is? No? Yeah, that's why it's canceled. But Axe Cop basically was no, not a webcam show. It'd be a very different type of show. Was this webcomic that was written by a 5-year-old and illustrated by his older brother. Adorable, right? Unfortunately, I spent a good 3 months painting frames of poop that had become reanimated. And there were poop soldiers, poop kings, poop queens. And that was my job at Fox. And so, you know, it was kind of like not the best job. I really kind of didn't like the vibe of it. It had a very like, I don't know, a lot of places in Hollywood are like this. It had like a really like, everyone's so chill. You know, we all have, there's vegan snacks in the fridge. You can have as much as you want. But like really, it's like under all of it, it's like a lot of pressure. You know, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of you gotta make sure you're doing everything right, or you're gonna be fucking fired, right? But it's so chill. It's super chill, guys. Like, we just like to, we're like a young startup, or like, it's very that. But it wasn't very that at all. And so, I remember the day that this happened, they had someone had a birthday party, right? And so I'm in the studio on my Cintiq coloring my frames of poop or whatever, and someone, is celebrating their birthday. It's a very joyous, happy experience, right? People are handing out shirts, there's streamers everywhere, and my director kind of comes over and like taps me on the shoulder and says, oh, can I speak to you for a second? And I'm like, oh, I'm about to get a fucking promotion. Like, because at Fox, like, there was the shorts team where a lot of my former classmates worked on, and it was basically, it gave you more leeway than coloring frames of poop all day. And I was really excited. I thought, well, I was gonna get promoted, but bitch, that wasn't in the cards apparently, because he very much gave me the, we've loved having you here. It's been great, let us know if you need anything. And they never mean that. And so I'm smiling there. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. And I go out of the room. And at the time I was listening a lot to this French band called Justice. And Justice has like a lot of like hard hitting like electro music or whatever. And I just put my headphones on and I walked out, and I was feeling, I was walking down Hollywood Boulevard like, bitch, I don't give a fuck. My life is fine. I'm listening to my Justice music. I low-key feel like a badass or whatever. And I remember like walking down to the subway and sitting down, and like the moment I sat down, it was like the universe became extremely heavy, and I just started crying. Because I had worked so hard to get to that point. I'd worked so hard. All you ever hear about growing up is you're gonna get a little job at a studio, and then that's gonna turn into you, getting your own show, and that's gonna turn into you becoming, you just hear all these fanciful stories about what's gonna happen if you pursue animation, right? And I just sort of was sitting there crying, not only because I lost that opportunity, which of course wasn't the last I was gonna get, but because I really knew in that moment that this really wasn't for me. This really, really, really wasn't for me. As much as I wanted it to be, it really, really, really wasn't for me. So I was sad, but of course a bitch has a backup plan. And I had at the time, I'd been talking to a couple different people about doing children's illustration. And so I ended up working on 2 different books. The first book was an adorable book that you probably will never see because I was doing things ass backwards. The right way to do children's illustration is to work for a publishing company and have the author, send in their script and be, of course, looked over by the publishing company, and then have it sent to you, and you never have contact with the author, and that's how it is. I was talking directly to the author, and he had a lot of opinions about everything that I was doing. And so what could have been a 3-month process turned into a little over a year. And I did a lot of work. This was back in the time where I thought $15 an hour was a lot of money. It's not. Please don't do that. I understand it sounds like it's more, but it's really not. And I think at the end of the day, I only got paid like $7,000 for the book. That's not going to get published, so I guess at the end of the day, it didn't really matter. I got paid, whatever. But it was, it was the book I'm most proud of. The second book I worked on was an atheist children's book. Some of you guys may know that I am an atheist, sorry. And I worked on this book that even though I am an atheist, I very much have this position of like, I think people have their religion and that's okay. Like it doesn't make sense to me or whatever, but that doesn't mean that it's invalid, and I don't really believe in like making fun of people's religions, so that's kind of, my thing. And this book was very much making fun of people's religions. The art is great though. The art is awesome. And when it comes out, you guys should buy it and you should take pictures with it and tag me in it, and we can all act like it's not an obnoxious atheist children's book. But I finished that book and I was pretty happy with it for the most part, but then I had nothing else to do. And I've always been the sort of person where I feel really like worthless when I can't work. And I had this YouTube channel that I'd had, since I was a teenager. Well, I had several YouTube channels because I like to reinvent myself, all the time, like fucking Madonna. And so I had this YouTube channel, and I was like, you know what? Let's start putting a little bit more effort and time into it, right? Now, when I started to kind of pursue more aggressively my YouTube channel, I kind of had this sort of concern because obviously I had this nervousness around being a person whose Google results said that they were trans. You know, even though, you know, I had been working with my classmates and stuff like that, so, you know, being stealth seemed like less of a realistic thing I could do. I was still so focused on, at the very least, my Google results only being like, when you look up Catherine Wilkins, I really enjoyed the fact that it was like pictures of smiling white women and then also my artwork. Like, I liked that. I was really nervous about the idea of like Googling me and finding out that I was transgender, right? That was sort of the scariest thing to me at the time, right? And so I kind of had this thing where as I was pursuing my YouTube channel, I didn't want it to become a big thing. I wanted to do it because I was an artist and I enjoyed making my videos, but I never really wanted it to become a known thing, right? And so I would, you know, I started putting a lot of my education I had in my animation classes into my videos. My videos became a little bit better. I did a trans collaborative with a bunch of other trans girls called The Dollhouse, and through there, I actually got the attention of a blogger that I looked up to a lot at the time, Cheska Lee. And Cheska Lee is like this amazing, you know, Black woman, social justice YouTuber who, you know, has done a lot of really cool stuff. And I was super excited when she had sort of looked through my page and saw my old Draw My Life video and was really inspired by it and wanted to work with me. But I had this sort of thing at the time where I was like, you know, she has 200,000 subscribers. If I work with her, obviously my Google results are going to change. Let me think about it. I told her, let me think about it. And so I went on and I started to kind of pursue my YouTube channel. And you know, this story is not going to make a lot of sense when I tell you. So just be prepared because it's funny that I thought like this at one point. So one day, in the midst of me, of course, pursuing my YouTube channel and making sure that it was all cute or whatever, I got contacted by BuzzFeed. And keep in mind, I was at the space in my life where I was in between jobs. I had my YouTube stuff, but of course, YouTube and freelancing in general is very, it's not secure. It's not the most, you know, it can be very, you don't make the same amount of money every month and you can't really rely on it. And so I had been talking to BuzzFeed about a job, and they were like, they saw my stuff, they were really excited, were working with me, and at the time I loved BuzzFeed. I was like, oh my gosh, it would be the most amazing thing for me to be a BuzzFeed employee. Now, if you guys go on my YouTube channel right now, my most popular video with over 1 million views is a video that I made about how terrible BuzzFeed is. So my positions have since changed, but I was super, super flattered by, you know, the option of me working with them, and they wanted me to come in and do a video about trans stuff. Now, in my mind, I thought to myself, who's gonna watch a BuzzFeed video about trans people? Like, what? That's not gonna go viral in the way that the other videos do. Like, I just thought I would be able to like do this video and like be okay and nothing would happen, nothing would come of it, right? And so I went in, I did the video, I had like a really, really great experience. I made sure that I was on my best behavior because I wanted a job. And you know, the video came out, it was really, really great. It was a video I did with Buck Angel, Kate Borenstein, a bunch of other really cool trans people. And it was just the most exciting thing. Of course, I was the only Black person in the video, but you know, that's usually the case with literally almost any trans representation. If you're not Laverne Cox or Janet Mock, people just don't call you. Sorry. So anyway, so the video came out and I was feeling kind of nervous about it because obviously a lot of people were watching it, but you know, I guess in the back of my mind I thought this is part of me pursuing YouTube, this is part of me working hard on YouTube, and so it is what it is, right? And so then I started getting emails from people, right? And a lot of the emails were from people who had known me for, at that point, years and didn't know that I was trans, that were like, oh, I saw this video and I didn't know this about you. That's very interesting. And I kind of was like, a little annoyed by it, but I was like, whatever, no big deal. And I got an email from actually one of the guys I worked on with the children's, and the Atheist Children's book. And he sent me an email that was like, oh, I saw this video. It was so inspiring. You know, I have a lot of friends who are drag queens, and I just think it's so amazing that. And of course, I stopped really reading, and I kind of had to say at this point, like, because you know, when sometimes allies, they do this thing where, like, you have to say to yourself, is it worth me taking them down right now? Is it worth conversation, or should I just be thankful that they're trying? And because I just really wasn't in the mood, I just said thanks, period, and just called it a day. And so that was okay. That was fine. You know, it was some people finding out, no big deal, right? Now, at the time, I was in a relationship, and if you follow my YouTube, my Facebook page, you remember, some people will remember the saga of the girl who doesn't pay rent. And the girl who doesn't pay rent was my boyfriend's. We lived in my boyfriend's cousin's house. No, my boyfriend's cousin's. No, my boyfriend's cousin's. It's always hard for me to say this. My boyfriend's cousin's boyfriend's mom's place. I did it that time. And she would always come over and never pay rent. She would never pay rent. And to me, I was always so just aghast at the audacity of staying over at someone's house for more than 3 hours and not doing dishes. Like, I was like, all right, okay, you know. And so I would kind of post a lot about the girl who doesn't pay rent. It was petty. I shouldn't have done it, whatever, but I did it. You know, we all have our lives, you know, whatever. And so, you know, to say she didn't like me, let's just say that. And my boyfriend's family at the time, they did not know that I was trans. His mom knew because she was kind of, because they knew that he liked trans women. And when she met me, I mean, not to sound obnoxious, but when she met me, she couldn't understand. She knew that I had a bad relationship with my family, but she couldn't understand what was wrong with me because I was so awesome. And so she was able to figure out that, like, oh, she's trans. So she was the only person in the family that knew. And so, you know, Miss Girl Who Doesn't Pay Rent, she saw this BuzzFeed video and rushed over to his grandparents' place to basically out me to the family. Now, to give context for this, I really don't have the best relationship with my family. And so for the past, you know, three or so years, I've been going over to Christmas. I've been going over to Thanksgiving. I've been having all these holiday experiences with them. And it started to feel good to have family, you know. It felt really, really good to have that. And so when she went and tried to, like, out me to them, it was really kind of her attempt at basically making so that I would not be part of the family. But, you know, it kind of backfired in a way because it didn't really end up going anywhere because they said, well, we've known her for so long and this doesn't really change anything, really. My boyfriend's grandparents, they're this adorable, it was his grandma is a Japanese woman, his grandfather is a white man, and they both met, you know, in Japan, you know, this cute little war story, whatever. And so they're very conservative, but they both were kind of like, you know, it took them a minute to understand, but they're essentially like, whatever, you know? And so she didn't really get what she wanted, and so of course she ran back to the place where we were living, and long story short, through a couple of different arguments, we ended up getting evicted. And that was kind of a really hard point for me to be in because obviously I had started to sort of slowly but surely get to this point where I was like, being visible as a trans person is awesome. You get to, you know, you get to encourage people, you get to uplift people, you're inspiring people. And I was like, well, there's not really anything negative that has come of it yet. But here I was now getting kicked out of the place I live because I was trans. And it honestly was a really, really low moment for me in my life because I had really started to feel like my choices of being visible had really backfired on me. And I had this thing where I was like, I knew that stealth was like the way for me to be. Because I have friends right now, even right now, who are totally stealth. You know, people who are teachers and things who, you know, live this life where no one knows, you know, and they do have a relatively comfortable, uncontroversial life. But I had made the decision to, like, go on BuzzFeed. And of course I didn't have control over that. That's millions of views now, people looking at me and knowing that I'm trans. And it just, you know, in that moment made me feel really bad. But then I recognized I had my relationship. He didn't leave. You know, I still had my family. I still had my friends. I was still on the up and up when it came to my career. I was still cute or whatever. It wasn't as scary as I had thought it was, right? And so we ended up moving to City of Orange, where I live right now. And that was really a space for me to sort of grow and change. And I had a lot of thoughts with myself about, Jessica Lee and working with her on, this project, because in my mind, the worst had happened. Because as a trans person especially, you become very concerned about what you being trans could mean for your future partners. Like I had always hated the idea of me being transgender hurting my relationship, hurting the person that I was with. And so I had, obviously this very distinct situation where it really did drive a rift between him and his family, but at the end of the day, he was still there, and so that gave me a lot of courage and a lot of, confidence. And so I decided that I would give Jessica Lee a call and we would work on this film that we did together called Sometimes You're a Caterpillar. And I wanted to show it to you guys now. So can we do that?
In the garden, there's a caterpillar and a snail, and they're basically best friends. They hang out 24/7. They do dinner, movie nights, crafts. Oh, and they're like really into cosplay on top of like whatever else caterpillars and snails do, like eat leaves or something. Anyways, one day they're on their way to a party that's right outside the garden, and they have to go through the fence to get there. So the caterpillar goes right through, but the snail is stuck. Her shell is just too big and it won't fit under the wire. So she's like, crap, I can't get through. Maybe like, can you lift up the wire, or maybe we can build a little bridge or something? And the caterpillar's like, dude, just go under. But she can't. There's just no way that the shell is gonna fit. And the caterpillar's like, go under, come on, we're gonna be late and I'm trying to hook up with that super cute ladybug. But it's not happening. The shell will not fit under the wire. And at this point, Snail's getting kind of frustrated because it's not like she doesn't want to go to the party, but for some reason, Caterpillar just isn't getting it. Yeah, it's not that easy for me. I just can't crawl under the fence like you can, so I would really appreciate your help here. Maybe we can like go a different way, and this just like sets the caterpillar off. What the heck? Just because I can crawl under stuff doesn't mean that I have it easy. Do you even know what it's like to have 16 feet? You don't, because finding shoes is a complete nightmare. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not saying you have it easy. I'm just saying I can't go under the fence because of my shell. That's it. I have a shell and you don't. And there's some stuff that's easier for you that's harder for me. Just like I don't know jack about finding shoes because I don't have feet. Caterpillar thinks about this for a second and realizes the snail is right. I mean, he's never had to think about shells or slimy trails, and that's a privilege that the snail has never had because she has to think about that stuff all the time. That's part of being a snail. And it's kind of like that for everyone, right? I mean, we all have our own struggles and challenges, and some of them are small and some of them are huge and really unfair and beyond our control. And a lot of the time, it can be hard to see what someone else deals with because you've never been in their shoes or shell. Like maybe you're gay or trans, have a disability or different religion, or of course the obvious one, you're a member of a different race. I don't know what it's like to be you, and you don't know what it's like to be me. So it's really important to stop and try and see the other side so we can help each other overcome those obstacles together. It's like sometimes you're the snail and sometimes you're the caterpillar. Oh yeah, okay, so then the snail and the caterpillar figured out that if they went to the other side of the garden, they could get through a little break in the fence. And while it took a little longer to get to the party, they did the trip together, which is what made it so great. So they got to the party, the caterpillar hooked up with the ladybug, snail taught everyone how to do the wobble, and the party was everything. The end. This video was illustrated by the very talented and lovely Kat Blaque and written and narrated by yours truly, Jessica Lee. Please check out Kat's channel and don't forget to subscribe. Bye!
So that was really the kind of culmination of me letting go of a lot of my fears of being visible and having my art life intersect with my, my trans life, And at this point, now I got a new phone and I don't know if this is gonna work, but if you say to Google, let me see, okay, Google, who is Kat Blaque? Oh, Biz, she said, I don't know.
Kat Blaque is an American YouTube personality and transgender rights activist.
And that used to terrify the shit out of me, is the fact that you could Google my name and it would not only say that I was trans, but it would tell everything else about me, including my legal name. But bitch, I'm comfortable now, so.